The world is a stage. 5 years after the release of a story of exploitation, neglect, discrimination, and misunderstanding of the mentally ill, more than $1 billion in the box office, a bunch of nominations and fancy awards, a lot of controversy surrounding the film's ethical values, an ambiguous message, and most importantly its settlement as a modern-day classic, the madness continues with Joker, Folie, deux. 2 years after the events of Joker, Arthur Fleck finds himself in custody at the Arkham State Hospital awaiting the forthcoming trial for the several atrocious murders committed during the first film, while casually bumping into Lee, another patient, yet a massive stalker and fanatic of the Joker, during a musical therapy session. And so Fleck embarks a lustrous, yet wild and mad love relationship while simultaneously battling with his evil identity as the Joker in search of finding his true self. With an enormous budget of $200 million, being the sequel to a highly praised movie, originally meant to be a standalone film, and even taking the artistic risk to feature musical numbers, this movie has all the ingredients to be either a massive success, as memorable as its predecessor, or a record-breaking hated box office failure. And hitherto, given its current earnings and reviews, it is clearly showing to be headed toward the second option's path. Given the first film's striking success and the fact that even the movie's director, Todd who returns to direct the sequel, at the time admitted he had no plans for a continuation and had thought of it to be a standalone story, Folie deux is being branded as unnecessary, pointless, even supposedly disrespecting or ruining the first movie's message, that could not be farther away from the truth in my opinion. My name is Third Eye and today I present to you my thoughts on the disregarded sequel, additionally seeking clearance as to the reason for its backlash. But before we go any further, make sure you subscribe to my channel if you like my videos, and if you have any idea for a future cinema related video, comment it down below. Beginning with the good, I honestly congratulate this film's visual effects team, as it is undoubtedly a visually stunning movie. From the dark, unsettling, and lackluster color palette of the Arkham State Hospital, mainly Fleck's cell and the isolation chamber, to the sophisticated and detailed trial scenes, and most prominently the fantastic, luxurious, colorful, and vintage musical scenes, where the visual effects and scenery peak. The film takes you to a journey of visual representations of Fleck's gradual transformation, the most colorful yet themely dark of which happening in Fleck's head. And so, I likewise praise the movie for the musical numbers and musical pieces themselves, that, albeit not having been composed for the movie, as they are mostly a selection of 50s and 60s jazz and soul classics, fit perfectly to the narrative of the scene and feelings of the characters they intend to transmit. And yes, even if they seem dragging and don't push the plot further for many, resembling more like interludes or afterthoughts rather than fitting musical statements, a criticism I do partially have to give credit to. To highlight the best in my opinion, we have the attempted escape scene, with Quinn and Fleck dancing and singing under the rain after Quinn having set the room of the previous scene on fire. Truly a great, fun and aesthetic moment of chemistry between these two characters, offering a glimpse of their shared madness and a beginning to their crazy love affair. There's also the Joker is me fantasy court scene, again colorful yet simultaneously packed with suspense and brief horror, and of great significance too, as this fantasy is what motivates Fleck to embrace his Joker persona and defend himself in court henceforward. Similarly, we have the we're gonna build a mountain musical scene, once more visually stunning, and incredibly playful and uplifting, with Quinn and the Joker sharing a fantasy of happiness and freedom in the shape of dancing and singing in a 60s themed bar that makes the drastic end of their affair even more tragic. And lastly, I have to mention how the scene of Fleck romantically singing to Quinn on television almost had me teared up. When it comes to the vocal performances, I think Gaga's needs no unhabitual commentary. I mean, she has already cemented herself as a great singer, and continues to prove herself as one here. But in the case of Phoenix, I admit I was pleasantly surprised. He sings his ass out here, hence the passion and emotion put into his singing excuses any detunes or vocal errors in my opinion. And that leads me to talk about the acting performances, which both on Gaga's and Phoenix's sides were fantastic, but stronger from Phoenix again in my view. The same emotionally broken, delusional, and mentally ill from the previous film is mirrored again by Phoenix, but this time with more complexity to the equation as of his development to self-consciousness for his atrocious acts and regret, not to mention his finding of true love, adding yet another layer of depth to his character. and Quinn successfully fuels his madness by standing for Fleck's delusional identity as the Joker and loving him for someone he is not. That leads them to finally part ways once Fleck finally discovers who he truly is. And speaking of the devil, the character development and alternating dynamic between him as Arthur Fleck and the Joker that critics and audiences are going apeshit about and hating to death, I find to be quite excellent, much more complimenting the first movie rather than undoing it, which couldn't be farther away from the truth. Ironically, those claiming this sequel ruins the sense of victory of Joker clearly completely misunderstood the movie's ending and overall message. That was never glorifying what the Joker did. Sure, to some degree it made audiences sympathize with his struggles and seek for revenge, but by any means did that mean anything he did was justified or understandable. Fleck was and is a mentally ill and delusional psychopath, and the movie made it clear several times throughout, and had the objective of raising awareness of how mocking, exploitation, and abuse on someone who is already mentally unstable can create a monster, not justifying hideous murderers or sympathizing with cold-blooded killers. And it is exactly that misunderstanding what sparked so much controversy on initial release, and saw Fleck's inverse transformation, additionally to the movie's plot constantly referring to the first movie, are meant to clarify just that. Arthur Fleck's final magnum opus was not the figure of the Joker, assassinating with no remorse and getting away with murder while originating violent and vandalist riots. Instead, him developing consciousness and regrets for his vicissitude are Phillips's tools to continue Fleck's character arc, that never finished with his identity as the Joker, and to reinforce the message of the original first left ambiguous. And let me tell you, the plot points that fuel Fleck's realization are absolutely fantastic. There's many, but this is no hour-long analysis, so I'll just get over the most obvious one, Gary's scene testifying to court. In his psychotic delusion after embracing his identity as the Joker during the previous movie's third act, Fleck punished to death those people that had mocked, excluded, and abused him for his disability, and pardoning those who treated him well and never made a deal out of it, believing himself to be a powerful justice defensor. And so that one scene where he brutally stabs Randall and yet lets Gary go unscathed takes place. What Fleck comes to realize after Gary's testimony in this movie is that his violent seek for justice failed miserably, partially because Gary never left that room uninjured, but traumatized for life for what he saw, with fears that would haunt him for the rest of his life, which results in probably the best scene of the movie in my opinion. Hence, he realizes that the Joker never achieved what he was meant to, and that his murders in the name of justice were hideous crimes driven by a mere illusion of power and equality, which all results in him giving up the identity as the Joker, confessing and taking accountability for his crimes. And by the way, I love the detail of him bursting out into uncontrollable laughter during the lecture of his sentence, given the outburst is actually a manifestation of struggle and regret for his crimes, shown multiple times throughout the first film and sporadically in this one, which is even misinterpreted by someone in the audience, reinforcing briefly the awareness for misunderstanding of the mentally ill from the first film. Notwithstanding Gary's incredible scene in trial, I thought the potential of the trial scenes was not completely taken advantage of. Sure, some were tense, emotional, and touching. However, the rest were not technical or professional enough in my view for trial scenes, with the questions asked to the witnesses about Fleck's double identity being kind of silly and pointless. In the context of great, complex, and realistic trial movies having been released recently, Anatomy of a Fall quickly coming to mind, I'm sure they could have done something more elaborate to make the art of defending the law justice. Moreover, having addressed the movie's biggest pluses and minor inconveniences, I would like to mention two less prominent upsides before going over its main downsides. Those are, for instance, the opening cartoon, matching with the vintage 50s and 60s ambiance and musical pieces create, and metaphorically summing up pretty much the entire problematic and main argument dealt with in the film in a really smart way. Additionally, there's the double meaning of the movie's title, both referencing Fleck's and Quinn's madness-driven love and affair, and also Fleck's inner conflict altering between his two identities. And now moving on to the bad, aside from the minor details I already mentioned, we have some other bigger things to talk about that may make the movie worse, but not nearly as bad as audiences are claiming it to be. There's the claim that Lee's character was not taken enough advantage of and had more potential for character development, and I have to agree to a certain level. Sure, she succeeded in her role of manipulating Fleck into his Joker persona and therefore bringing out the worst in him, but they made no room for her own personal struggles, as if her character had to be linked all the time to the Joker figure. And I do also think that the ending was a bit weak. Sure, it made more or less sense for the Joker to be replaced, considering he abandoned the identity, and for him to receive equal punishment for his crimes. However, him being stabbed to death by a random stalker inmate was very unspectacular in my opinion, and not worthy of a character with such an interesting development and story. However, I do like the detail of the murderer cutting a smile to his face, symbolically embracing the Joker persona and demonstrating that the Joker truly was an illusion in Fleck's mind. Lastly, I also agree that it stretches out too long and becomes slightly boring towards the end. Likewise, the musical numbers become a bit weary too, a problem that could have been solved by reducing their amount and giving the film a slight faster pace, but as I said, I find this to be a minor inconvenience. And so, to conclude, I stress my disagreement with the enormous and unjustified backlash the movie is receiving for the stupidest and less sensical reasons, as if being a musical, and a great one too, automatically made it worth nothing, and as if it disrespectfully undid the sense of victory of the previous movie, which is only the case if you misinterpreted its message and understood everything wrong in regards to the meaning of the Joker figure. I much rather believe it respectably succeeds in continuing and closing, not undoing, Arthur Fleck's crazy and complex character arc, while bringing external parties to the mix in the process and fantastic musical numbers to the equation, with one or the other flaw embedded in its main plot, points that unfortunately lower the experience, all for a final score 9 out of 10. And now, of course, it is your turn to tell me what you think about this movie. Every opinion counts. And as for me, this was all I had to say. Until next time, bye. See you around.